What would you do if the person you were sent to destroy turned out to be the only one who ever truly saw you? And this story shows that the wait for real love, no matter how painful the road, can be repaid in ways you never imagined. The deposition was supposed to take 40 minutes. Margaret Hale had conducted hundreds of them, and she had learned early in her career at Caldwell and Price that 40 minutes was the outer limit of anyone's patience before the masks began to slip. She walked into the conference room on the 32nd floor of the Daily Center building that January morning in 1993 with 2 yellow legal pads, a recorder, and the absolute certainty that Daniel Voss was a fraud. He was already seated when she arrived. She had expected arrogance, the particular sort that came with men who built companies from nothing and convinced themselves the rules had been written for somebody else. What she had not expected was the way he looked up from the window, the gray Chicago skyline behind him, and said simply, "I know why you are here, and I understand." She sat down without replying. She pressed record. Daniel Voss was 38 years old and had founded Meridian Construction 6 years earlier with a loan from his mother and a reputation for completing projects other contractors refused. His company had built 3 affordable housing developments on the South Side, and now the city of Chicago was accusing him of diverting federal funds, falsifying completion reports, and bribing a zoning inspector named Ferris. Margaret's firm had been retained by the city. She had 400 pages of documentation and a timeline that appeared watertight. But 40 minutes became 3 hours. He answered every question without deflection, without the practiced evasion she had learned to detect in the pauses between syllables. When she pressed, he pushed back, not with hostility but with precision, pointing to documents she had seen but not properly read, dates she had accepted without verification. At one point he slid a folder across the table and said, "I think you will want to look at page 11. She looked. She kept her face expressionless. She drove home that night through sleet and sat in her parked car outside her flat building on Dearborn for a long while before going inside. Margaret had built her entire professional identity on being the person who finished things. She had grown up the daughter of a secondary school librarian in Evanston who clipped grocery coupons and ironed her work blouses the night before, and she had understood before she was 12 that the distance between her life and a different kind of life was made entirely of sustained effort. She had graduated top of her class at Northwestern Law. She had never lost a case she truly believed in. The problem was beginning to form at the back of her mind like a crack in frozen pavement, slow and widening. She was no longer certain she believed in this one. The depositions continued twice a week through February. She told herself she was being thorough. She told herself the additional sessions were procedurally justified. Her supervising partner, a compact, efficient man named Aldridge, asked once why the case was taking so long, and she said the defendant was unusually organized, which was true, and said nothing else. Daniel brought coffee in the 3rd week. He set a cup beside her recorder without comment, and she did not thank him and did not drink it until he looked away, and then she drank half of it in one long swallow because she had been awake since 5. She learned things about him the way she learned everything, through documentation first and then inference. He had grown up in Pilsen. His father had died on a construction site when Daniel was 9, a scaffolding failure, a contractor who had cut corners on safety equipment. He had never spoken about it in interviews. She found it in an old neighborhood newspaper profile from 1988, 2 paragraphs buried near the end. She read it 3 times and then filed it in a folder she labeled background only and did not discuss it with Aldridge. In the 4th week she asked him, during a break, why he had chosen construction. He looked at her for a moment as if deciding something. Then he said, "Because I wanted to build things that lasted." She wrote nothing down. It was the end of March when she found the Ferris payment records, the ones her own team had flagged as evidence of bribery. She had looked at them before and accepted the interpretation without digging further because the timeline fit and because Aldridge had said it was clean. but she pulled the originals again on a Tuesday night alone in the office, and she went backwards, transaction by transaction, and she found something that should not have been there: a second set of city records, filed 6 weeks before the payments in question, showing that Ferris had already signed off on the zoning variance before any money had changed hands. The payment had not purchased the approval. The approval had already been granted. The payment was something else, and she stayed at her desk until midnight reading everything again from the beginning, and by the time she switched off her lamp she understood that the case the city had built was not a case. It was a story told backwards from a conclusion somebody had already chosen. She did not sleep. The near separation came not from a misunderstanding between them but from the structure of the world they were both inside. Margaret went to Aldridge the next morning and laid out what she had found. She was careful and precise, and she watched his face close in the way faces close when a problem becomes inconvenient. He told her the interpretation was defensible. He told her the city needed this case to go forward for reasons that extended beyond the specifics of the documentation. He told her she was young and that her judgment, while admirable, was perhaps insufficiently calibrated to the political realities of municipal litigation. She understood in that moment that she was being asked to be a different sort of lawyer from the one she had believed herself to be. She called Daniel that evening from a pay phone 2 blocks from her office, standing in the cold with her coat open because she had left the building without stopping to fasten it. She told him she needed to speak with him outside any formal proceeding. He said, "I know. Tell me where." They met at a diner on Michigan Avenue that was nearly empty on a Wednesday night. She laid the documents on the table and explained what she had found, slowly and without drama, because the facts were dramatic enough on their own. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked at the papers for a long moment and then looked at her and said, "You are telling me you are going to blow up your own case." She said, "I am telling you the case should not exist." He said, "This will cost you your position at the firm." She said, "I know." He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "Margaret." "Why?" And she said, "Because you built things that lasted, and somebody tried to tear them down, and I am not going to be the instrument of that." What she did not say, because she did not yet have the language for it, was that somewhere in those long depositions across a conference room table, watching him refuse to make himself small under pressure, she had understood something about the kind of person she wanted to be, and that it was the same kind of person he already was. She filed the supplemental disclosure with the court the following Monday morning. Aldridge accepted her resignation before noon. She cleared out her office in 40 minutes, which she noted with bleak private humor, and she walked out of the Caldwell and Price building into a cold April afternoon carrying a banker's box and her 2 yellow legal pads. The case against Daniel Voss was dismissed 6 weeks later when the city declined to proceed in light of the corrected record. An internal investigation into how the original documentation had been assembled was quietly initiated, and then, less quietly, it led to the resignation of a deputy commissioner whose relationship with Ferris turned out to be considerably more complicated than anyone had acknowledged. Margaret spent those 6 weeks doing contract work for a small firm in Wicker Park that handled tenant disputes and labor grievances. She was not miserable. She was, for the first time in years, no longer performing the person she was supposed to be. Daniel rang her on a Saturday in May. He asked whether she would have coffee with him, and she said yes without pretending to think about it. They sat outside at a table on the pavement because the weather had finally broken and the city was doing what it did in the first real warmth of spring, opening itself up, people moving differently, slower and more willing to be present. He told her that Meridian had been awarded a new contract, a school renovation in Bronzeville. He told her he had been approached by a community development nonprofit that wanted him on their board. He told her that his mother had cried when the case was dismissed, which was the first time he had mentioned his mother, and she understood it as a form of trust. She told him she had accepted a job offer from the tenant firm. Permanent. She told him the salary was a third of what she had earned before, and he said, "Are you all right with that?" And she said, "I think I am actually, for the first time, practicing law." He reached across the table and placed his hand over hers and left it there. The difficult thing about being honest with yourself, she had learned, was that it required you to stop moving long enough to hear what you actually thought. She had spent 11 years in motion. She looked at his hand on hers and at the street and at the light reflecting off the glass buildings, and she thought, this is what I was moving towards without knowing it. They were married the following January, in a small ceremony at a restaurant in Pilsen that his mother had helped choose. Margaret's mother came from Evanston and wore her good blue dress and cried twice, once during the vows and once when Daniel gave a toast about the document on page 11 of a folder and the solicitor who had actually read it. Margaret opened her own practice the spring after their wedding. She took cases other firms found inconvenient, and she was good at it, better than she had been before, because she was no longer afraid of the conclusion. Daniel's company completed the Bronzeville School on schedule and under budget, and at the ribbon cutting a city councillor shook his hand and said she had heard about him, and he said quietly that he hoped that was a recent development. On the night after the ribbon cutting they sat on the steps of their house in Ukrainian village, and she leaned against him and he put his arm around her, and the city carried on doing what cities do, indifferent and luminous, and she thought about a conference room in January and a cup of coffee she had almost not drunk and the 40 minutes that became the rest of her life. Did you enjoy today's story? Do stay with me for a moment. Do let me know in the comments, which city are you watching from? Did this message touch you? And if you have ideas for future stories, please share them. Your suggestion may become our next video. Leave a like if this message meant something to you. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. If you think someone else would appreciate this message, do share it. And if you'd like to support the channel, have a look at the links in the description. Some are affiliate links, which support us at no extra cost to you. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video.